A new survey about religion in America came out this week, so you know I'm excited. It's actually really fascinating because I think it shines a light on something you may have suspected but didn't necessarily have numbers to back it up. Well, now you do. Here's the bottom line, courtesy of the Pew Research Center, which I've always found to be a pretty reliable source on this sort of thing. The percentage of Americans who claim no religious affiliation is now at 29%, higher than it has ever been. I'll get to the charts in a second, just two quick notes. First, for the sake of this video, I won't get into their methodology, but there is a link below for all you fellow stats nerds who want to know how they compiled this data. Second, just to give you a baseline here, in 2014, when Pew released this massive study about religion in America, they found that the percentage of Americans with no religious affiliation was about 23%. That was a bombshell at the time because in 2007, the number was about 16%. So 16%, 23%, and now, today, it's 29%, which is mind-blowing. I would also assume that if you just looked at younger Americans, that number would be substantially higher. So, what happened since 2014 to fuel this increase? Well, just to name a few quick theories, we've seen the presidency of Donald Trump, the white evangelical shift toward Trumpism and all the bigotry associated with him, a pandemic that was made worse by religious Americans who refused to abide by sensible restrictions, more sex abuse scandals, not just in the Catholic Church, but within major Protestant denominations, and a lot more ex-evangelicals and other former believers speaking out against their former churches about things like the harm of purity culture. I haven't even mentioned Josh Duggar. And when more people are proudly and openly non-religious, it takes away the stigma from people who might be on the fence about it. So I kind of wonder how many of these people in the 29% were non-religious for a long time, but never felt comfortable saying it until now. Basically, there's been a whole bunch of reasons people might want to abandon organized religion and not keep that a secret anymore. And while this survey doesn't attempt to explain the trend like I'm doing, it does show that organized religion is losing ground. Just look at this chart. Look at the directions of these lines. There is a continued push away from organized religion. It's going down, down, down. And that trend has been going on for many years now. Meanwhile, those of us on the pro-reason part of this chart just keep rising. Actually, I feel like that chart doesn't do justice to what's actually happening because Christian is used as a catch-all term. Catholics, white evangelicals, and other Protestants may be united under Jesus, but there's really no reason people should lump them all together. In fact, as Pew also found, most of the ground we're gaining, and they're losing, is the result of Protestants ditching the label, not Catholics. Since 2007, there's been a 6% drop among born-again or evangelical Protestants, and a 6% drop among other Protestants. Now, maybe you see all that and assume the decline in organized religion has something to do with how toxic those labels have become. But the survey also found other information suggesting that belief in God itself is on the decline, not just the various groups that exist to worship Him. Here's one example of that. Pew found that the percentage of adults who pray every day is at an all-time low, under 50%. I thought for a moment that those people who pray daily just shifted to praying weekly or monthly, but that's not the case at all. It's actually worse than that if you're a fan of religion. The decline in daily prayer mirrors the rise in not praying at all, or doing so rarely. So it's not that people shifted from being religious to thinking of Christianity as something they do on a Sunday morning. They shifted from being religious to finding a better use of their time entirely. In fact, Pew said, while it's tough to measure if religion is an important part of people's lives, their surveys show that only 41% of Americans feel that way today, compared to 56% back in 2007. Religion just isn't as important to people. These are not apples to apples comparisons, I should say, because they come from different types of surveys, but it's still pretty significant. So, here's a question you might be wondering. There's this huge rise in secular Americans, but does that mean there's a rise in atheism? No, it doesn't. Atheists are still about 4% of the US population, as we have been for several years. Agnostics have been around 5% for a while now, too. The rise in secular Americans comes entirely from the nones camp, which has jumped from 12% in 2007 to 20% today. These are the people who just don't have a religious label, even if they might believe some supernatural ideas. And you know what? I'll take it. It could be so much worse. I'm not eager to group myself with the sorts of people who take horoscopes and a nebulous higher power seriously, but if it takes some power or superiority away from the religious, okay. But here's the real question. How important is any of this? I mean, it's not like we win an award. I did an interview earlier this week where I was asked if any of this matters. And I'll tell you what they quoted me saying, since it is accurate and I still believe it. All these numbers are meaningless unless we convert them into political power. Conservative Christians do that really well. They still have all the power. We're growing in numbers, but we have no political power. Unless we can figure out how to get politicians to care about issues that matter to most of us, what's the point? As you can tell, I was in a very good, totally not cynical mood. But let me elaborate on that a bit. I mentioned earlier that the Christian catch-all term didn't mean all that much, and I could say the same here. People with no religion are not monolithic in our views, at least compared to atheists who are overwhelmingly aligned on the side of progressive politics. It doesn't matter how many nuns there are if we, as a group, vote below our weight compared to conservative Christians, white evangelicals, conservative Catholics, etc., who always show up for their side in elections. It also means if Democrats want to court a reliable voting bloc in the future, they need to play up their support for the things almost all of us nuns do support. Church-state separation, science education, LGBTQ rights, reproductive justice, racial justice, comprehensive sex education, reason-based legislation, etc. All those things Republicans and their Jesus-loving voter base actively oppose. I am not asking Democrats to promote atheism. And I'm not saying secular Americans should always support every Democrat on the ballot. But if we want to live in an America that actually represents Americans, it would help if politicians weren't constantly guided by whatever the most conservative religious Americans wanted. They are in it for themselves and the afterlife. We are in it for everyone in this life. As it stands, 100% of the Supreme Court is religious, most of them Catholic. 96% of the current Congress is religious. Almost all the rest of them, by the way, just didn't answer the religion question. It's not like they're atheists. And of that 96%, almost all of them, 88%, are some brand of Christian. There's nothing illegal about any of that. But when it comes to religion, the people who make decisions for all of us do not share the beliefs of all of us. Which means we need religious politicians to set policies for non-religious Americans. It's obviously possible, but I wish it were always automatic. Until the demographics of Capitol Hill change, though, I personally believe Democrats need to take us more seriously and act accordingly, because it's not like the other party has any intention of doing it. And we have to do our part by voting our values. All that said, I'm kind of amazed that after 4 years of political domination by the religious right, they didn't manage to do much of anything that won people over to their side. Even today, they're just attacking abortion rights and racial justice and trans people. If that's what today's most vocal religious and conservative voices are supporting, it's no wonder support for organized religion is still heading south.